Hi, everybody. Welcome to Modern Day Apocrypha.
Fun little awkward silence to start this one off. That's fun.
Yeah, just try to change it up a little bit. You know, got to keep you on your toes.
Exactly. What is this? Episode 16 now?
17, I think.
I think this is 16.
All right. We'll call it 16 and a half.
Maybe it is 17. It's something.
We're talking about spirituality today, guys.
Yes, we are. So we've talked about previously, I'll bring us back on topic instead of where Cliff I was about to jump off of 10 seconds into this episode. We've talked about this before, and when it comes to like spiritual or mystical things, most of my life has hung out in that realm, and most of your life has hung out not in that realm. Am I right?
Yeah, and just to put some words behind that, you know, I grew up in a Christian church for, the first 10 years of my life, maybe less, maybe about that. And then after that, just kind of for no reason other than it just kind of wasn't a habit anymore.
Yeah.
Of course, as a 11-year-old or 10-year-old, it's not like I'm making my decisions to be like, I'm done with this.
Right.
But yeah, so ever since then, it's just kind of been more outside of that space.
Cool. Well, I know I've probably got a lot of different stuff I can talk about, but before I talk about or dig into some of any of that, what I'd like to do would be to get your perspective on what spirituality is from somebody who hasn't spent a ton of time in it.
Yeah, interesting. So what is spirituality to me? I think spirituality relies on some semblance of feeling like you have a soul.
Okay.
Like it's hard for me to separate spirituality from having a soul. And so if you are of that mindset, then to me, spirituality is about being connected to your soul and what it means to have a good soul, whether that's positive energy or faith in a specific deity. But it's that connection with your soul.
Okay. Would for people who wouldn't necessarily subscribe to any of what you just said on how you tied from the soul piece, could your soul in your perspective also maybe be your consciousness, or is that two different things in your perspective?
I think the jury's out on that one.
Okay.
That's a good question. So like, is your soul different than your consciousness? I think so. I don't know. I guess if I flip the question back around on you, do you think that animals have a soul?
It's a great question. I was just trying to factor in people who might like identify in that like atheist category.
Yeah.
And so most of, I feel like your initial description pointed heavily towards some sort of deity, or even if you filter that out, greater collective energy. If you just strip away the name of deity, it's still kind of the same thing.
Right.
I guess it's just the difference of a personality or not.
So I think I know where you're going with this because I know you well as personally, you know. But so when you're talking about consciousness, you're talking the path that you're going on is that there's a greater consciousness that we're all connected to.
Maybe. And I guess I wasn't trying to lead anywhere. It was more just thinking about how do we make this conversation all inclusive?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I would categorize myself as an atheist.
Okay.
I find it easier to believe that everything that's of this earth is, what do you even use for words? Natural. Like it wasn't intentionally placed there. It was more a product of the way that biology and physics are just structured, and over billions and billions of years, it manifests itself into what we have today.
So it was self-directed versus externally directed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so for me, that's more believable. That doesn't mean that I like reject
Sure.
Religions, because I think that that's viable. It just doesn't make as much sense to me.
Sure.
And so that's why I'd categorize myself as an atheist. But to me, I can still feel like there's something more. I want to believe that there's something more, and there are different experiences that I've had that make me feel like there's something more, but there's been no explanation that's come anywhere close to being able to define those feelings.
Yeah. And I think spirituality is sometimes difficult because it's, at least from my experience, it seems like the best way to understand it or make it tangible to yourself is to experience it. And so to take just your mind and try to put a box on it like we do with other things, like scientifically, it's hard to put a box around something that doesn't fit in that box. And so I think that's where a lot of people have that struggle of going, I like the idea of something else, bigger, greater, but by the way I know how to define stuff, like I can measure and weigh this table. How do I measure and weigh? I mean, we've talked about other things before, like psychedelic experiences. Sure, there's a way to kind of test that, but there's still a realm of that that's still untestable.
Yeah, and I mean, you get a different feeling. Like if I'll go to mushrooms, you feel whatever we want to call it, a connection to Mother Nature and each other. And it's like a wholeness, and it's an energy that you don't pick up on without having that experience. Or maybe you have to have, something else, whether it's meditation or some other type of intentionality to get to that state where you can pick up on that energy that I've experienced through mushrooms. But does that mean that there's like a God, or does that mean that there's a collective consciousness?
It's hard.
I don't know.
It's a hard question to answer, right? Like, and then there's, the other side of it. Bro, you just had drugs. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, like, dude, you're tripping balls. But I know that you can't defend that argument because it is true.
Yeah.
But I'll say that my experiences have been such that I don't think that it's attributed to you just took drugs and you're just like losing your mind or you're out of your mind. Like you're very much grounded in reality, but it's just you're more tuned in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. And I think, for me, spirituality, I think I would define as anything that is in the experienced in the non-physical. So anything that's not here. And so there's all these different traditions, religions, all that stuff, even psychedelics we just mentioned. I think from my perspective, I think all of these are doors to the same room, maybe greater room. I don't think if you enter through the door of, Islam and Christianity, stereotypical, like pitted against, or have very different beliefs and core pieces. You're going through each door, you're not going to experience the same thing on the other side of that door. But I think the plane of existence maybe might be a good way to say it. You're entering into the same place.
Can we back up? So
yeah,
I want to just kind of dissect that a little bit. So your opinion is that if you're practicing Islam, then what happens on the other side of this physical realm may be different than what happens to somebody who's practicing Christianity?
So not necessarily post-death, but in the practice of that in your life, the whatever types of altered states of consciousness you have, elevated awareness, in your prayer, in your, worship services, you're going to experience that spirituality. And I think that's a door to it. You experienced something, a bigger connectedness with your mushroom experience. I think it's the same thing, but it's a different experience, even though you're in the same place.
But it's all tapping into whatever that metaphysical body is.
Yeah. So think of it like the ocean, right? I can go to 1,000 different beaches, and some of them are going to be ice cold. Some of them are going to be great and clear. Some of them are going to be dark. It's still all the ocean, but your experience is different.
Right. Yeah, that was a good analogy. That makes sense.
So who fucking knows, right? But I think that's my perspective of it, especially after experiencing, a couple of different traditions. I I think that's kind of where I've landed so far.
Yeah, I think that's a good definition. So, or a good way that, you would, I guess, define it. We'll just leave it there. I don't know where I was going. Come on, Jesus, where were you? Help me out here. Interesting. Okay. And so I know that you've been practicing, we call it energy work, but
Yeah.
why don't you kind of explain what your experiences are with energy, and does that tie into spirituality in your mind?
Yeah, I think it absolutely does.
I agree based off of what I've experienced with you.
Yeah. And so I guess, shit, where do you want me to go? I can talk for a whole hour just on this.
Well, just tell us what it is and why it's important to you and kind of like what impact it's had.
Like energy work specifically, or just energy as a whole?
I think energy work specifically, because that kind of grounds us in what you've practiced and experienced. And then maybe we can open the doors on energy as a whole.
Sure. So a lot of the stuff that I've been kind of learning and, practicing is understanding that there's a level of our being that is non-physical. And so I know that's coming more popular or more aware in our Western culture over here in America. But in Eastern culture, like people talk about like your different chakras, and that's basically just governing energy centers. And a lot of those chakras and stuff will connect to different areas of your physical body. And so then there's like your emotional aspects, your mental aspects. And the more you learn, and attune might be a good word to say it, or become aware, I guess it's just like trying to think of a good analogy here. I guess my day job, right? When I started as an instructional designer, I was not very good. But the more I did it, the more I understood the subtleties of what made a good presentation. And it's the same thing working with energy and people's energy. At first, it's like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. But now, the more that I work with people and work with their energy, you can get a sense for, here's where your systems are in balance, and here's where those things can be affecting your life, whether that be something physical, mental, emotional, struggling to accomplish something in your life because you've got a subconscious self-destructive pattern that's there that you can't see. Energy work looks at your system from a energetic level and sees what's off and out of balance to try to bring it into balance so that you can have a better life and experience better versions of whatever it is you're trying to experience. Does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah, absolutely. So what comes to my mind is that it serves the same or a similar function as like therapy or counseling or talking to a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
But the medium through which you achieve your results is different.
Right. And I'm not going to say one's better than the other because I think everything has its place. But to talk about the differences is I feel like therapy, which I've done, was valuable to me in my journey. It was all mental. And so if I couldn't wrap my head around it and there was something going on in my energy systems, some of the same issues that I could not work through in therapy, I was able to work through in a couple of sessions of energy work.
So let me break that down, because that's where I feel like I start getting disconnected.
Sure.
And just for the record, I've had 2 sessions with an energy healing, and it's been interesting and it's been valuable. It's forced me to think through things in a different way and just be more aware and in touch with, I have no other word to describe it other than with my energy.
Right.
And but what I start feeling disconnected from is when we talk about, like you said, that the therapy has been good for working through your mental mindset. I have a hard time differentiating that from what we're calling energy.
Sure. So I think the thing I would differentiate would be and people are going to have different experiences, right? So I want to throw that out there because I'm not trying to say that one's better than the other. Again, I said it before, I'll say it again. They both have their place and they're both valuable.
Yeah, and we're just talking about a different path to get to hopefully similar results.
Exactly. But for me, in my experience, some of these like traumatic events that I was trying to work through, like I could talk about them, and I kind of just gave my own answers pretty much. And, you know, a therapist was like, wow, you're really self-aware. And I'm like, cool. And it was what I needed to like get the encouragement to keep moving forward, but it didn't actually help me resolve. Mm-hmm. And when I worked on the same thing in a couple of sessions through energy work, I was able to see the root of what was going on energetically and shift that. And then it was resolved. And now it's not this thing that pops up anymore. And I'm like, fuck, I thought I was done with this. It is done.
So when you say you're able to see the root of what was causing problems energetically, what does that mean? Does that mean that that through these energy healing sessions, you've been able to pick up on the source of negative energy that might be manifesting itself in your everyday life as anger or frustration, or like, you know, it might be something specific like, why am I so stressed about somebody cutting me off every day when I'm driving in traffic? And there's like this core issue that blossoms outwards and manifests itself into, let's just say, anger, for example.
I think that's a good way to explain it. That wasn't necessarily my experience. As you get into this, and this, I mean, we talk about out there shit. So, but this is out there. The metaphysical world is fucking fascinating to me, but it's so different than our physical world. Imagine being able to have, we'll call it energetic access. So everyone's got their own energy field, right? So just imagine like my bubble. And if you know what to do, and this is where shit gets nefarious, you can take other people's energy without them knowing. And so for me, the shit that I went through in that traumatic experience, someone put some stuff to be stealing my energy, which is why every time I tried to go through it, that system was still there to take my energy and keep that cycle of me feeling depressed, which is a lack of energy, and worthless. And then, oh, so we resolved that, and now I get to keep my energy, and I feel so much better. Doesn't mean I'm fixed and fucking perfect. There's 1,000 other things that I get to work on and
you are,
elevate. Tony. Fuck off, Nick. But again, it's out there and it's hard to explain, but that's kind of how some of this shit works.
Yeah, it is hard to explain, but so is spirituality as a whole. So,
and here we are trying to describe all of that. Exactly.
So yeah, I think it's interesting and I think it's all relevant. And just for anybody listening, I don't know if this is your definition of metaphysics, but to me, it's like how your mind influences matter.
I think that's an okay definition. I think for me, yes, but there's more than that.
Okay.
Because I think sometimes if we go back to dimensions, right? Like we've talked about my multidimensionality before. What if some of this stuff that I'm trying to describe lives in a non-3-dimensional space and we can affect and interact with that? Now it's not necessarily affecting with matter as we might define it. Did you follow me or did I get too crazy?
I followed you, but it's out there.
Yeah.
So, okay. So that was good though. So my thoughts around like metaphysics are, I do think that your mindset changes the outcome in the physical realm. For example, if let's say you're a soccer player and you want to practice hitting the ball and getting it into the upper 90, top right corner, for example. So it's hard for the keeper to get and block and save it. Well, I think that your mindset can directly result in how successful you are in learning that skill. Because if you're positive minded, then that means that you're probably going to be out there that extra 30 minutes that somebody who is in a negative state might have given up. I failed 30 times. I'll just catch it tomorrow. Whereas somebody who's like, I really feel like I'm going to get this.
Right.
Will keep trying. And then I also think that it changes how you focus on things. Are you kicking the soccer ball in the best way possible? And you really kind of pay attention to that. And so maybe that's a really shitty example of metaphysics. I don't know, but
I think it's a good one.
That's kind of what makes sense to me on how your mindset and maybe that's an extension of your energy. I don't know, but how that can translate into a physical outcome.
Another perspective to add to that. Have you ever looked at, I can't remember his name right now, but I think he was a Japanese scientist who did experiments on ice.
You showed me this.
Yeah, wasn't it fucking wild?
Yes.
So basically, he would play like classical music, which has been known to be kind of like harmonious and balancing on water, and then freeze that water. And the formations and the ice crystals were very harmonious and beautiful. And then he would play metal, and it would just be the chaos of the energy. And don't get me wrong, all you metal people, I'm not shitting on it. I love metal myself. But it would just be chaotic in there. And then they did shit with plants where they'd like put two plants next to each other, and one day they would put their positive intention and bless it, and the other one they would curse it and like say terrible things to it. And over a period of just a couple of weeks, one plant like fucking flourished and the other one was so decrepit and fell to shit. And so I know some people don't always subscribe to like your words have power, just have a positive mindset. And I want to be careful as we start to talk about these things, because it's not like ignore the bad shit. Yeah, I think you have to address it, but to validate what you were just saying about mindset and soccer, that shit's been like proven.
Yeah. So the plant thing, who knows how that works, because that's just fucking magic right there.
It's energy.
We need to go talk nicely to our jalapeno plants over there in a minute. They're struggling. Hey, that's what winter's about. Anyway. So when we go back to the ice crystals, I don't know if you had framed this up. You may have, so I apologize if I'm being redundant. But essentially, you've got water, and then while that water is dropping in temperature and starting to freeze, there's that music playing in classical or metal, and they had a few other genres playing as well. Billy Bob, hillbilly, banjo music. Kidding. But, and so that changes the way that the water freezes. A physical explanation for that could be that the music has actual sound waves, and those sound waves travel through water. If you yell at water, you can actually see ripples. And so...
But that's just it right there. If we're made up of 60 or 70% water, and you see these experiments that affect water the same way, to me, in my mind, that's proof that we're affected very similarly.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'm not saying that that's the reason why, because I think it's been a while, but when I looked at the pictures, it doesn't look like that's what's causing the changes.
Right.
But I'm just trying to think about like what could be a physical explanation for
Absolutely.
it. So if we get back to like your words have meaning, how do you think that ties into the overall energy? Do you think that's more of like, if you use negative words, it's the word itself that has negative energy, or do you think it's
words are just
like
representation
intention behind it?
It's both, right? Words and it's just a representation of energy, right? So when you tell somebody, dude, I love you, you feel that like, oh man, I feel so loved.
I do, man.
Or sarcastically say, oh, fuck off, man. Again, it's a term of endearment, but you can say the same words. So I think it's a combination of the words, but the intention, and they're the carrier of the energy.
I see. That makes sense. So how do you differentiate emotion from energy?
I think emotion, I think emotion would be more tied to feeling and your personal experience, whereas energy in my mind is part of everything. And so I think emotion could be a form of energy, but energy isn't always emotion.
Okay. So, and the reason why I bring that up is because like if you're saying, love you, bro, or
sure,
whatever you're saying to somebody, I think that changes the emotions because we have like a mindset that's been developed to get the warm and fuzzies whenever somebody tells us that they love us, or
Right.
whatever it is, like something friendly, something inviting and warm and welcoming. And those all like induce certain emotions. And then the opposite is true if somebody's calling you a turd and making fun of you mama.
Exactly.
Doesn't feel good. And so that changes your emotional state.
But from there, it also would change your energetic state.
Because if you're happy, you have positive energy.
So think of your energy like a magnet, right? And so and look at most successful people. Not that all successful people are positive, but they've figured out how to create that magnet. And a lot of times, repetitive action is one way to do it. And so you work hard, you build your stuff, you stay consistent, you stay focused. It's all doing that with the energy. And so what I've found is that it's not a Band-Aid or a lottery ticket, but when you look at the energy aspect of it, and you can go a shorter route to optimize your system to get where you want to go quicker, without having to go the long, like, grinding this out for 20 years, man.
It makes things easier.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that makes sense. So getting back to like spirituality and how all of this relates, you made a comment about energy being different than a soul per se. And I want to be like, if we just kind of expand beyond the energy conversation,
Yeah.
because I think that's, it's something that I'm new to, and I think it's been helpful. And like I said earlier, like I felt different, and felt like I could achieve more, and there was more clarity and unity in the way that my different ideas, different problems might be stemming from different things.
But that's the cool thing, is that, again, going back to that analogy earlier of same space, different doors, that's just one door.
Gotcha. So would you, in your mind, is there like I think the term is nirvana that you can achieve?
Enlightenment, nirvana, same
Enlightenment,
thing.
yep.
Yeah. Is there some, me personally, or is what you're saying, or?
Is that a thing to you?
That's interesting. I don't know, man. I'm just trying to figure out today. So I guess allegedly, like, enlightenment is really, in several different traditions, from what I've experienced, or from what I'm aware, and understand. Enlightenment is this: you work through all of your karma or your shit, or you learn all the lessons you need to, and you complete either a life cycle, whether that be a string of a bunch of lives that you've lived, and you've done all the stuff you've needed to.
Meaning like reincarnation?
Yeah. Or basically it's like you transcend this life without dying. You just materialize into whatever. And I don't know, like, that's not something that I've been super focused on personally.
Sure.
But I think that's a best description of it from my awareness being around different circles.
So here's what I find interesting about this is in Hindu culture, they talk about like achieving a state of nirvana.
Yeah.
And it's like a state that you get to. And I think it's similar to energy. Like there's a state of energy, and maybe there's not like this pinnacle. I don't know. You could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's interesting that some cultures view this state as like the pinnacle of perfect happiness and peace and being one with yourself. And then others talk about, like, we'll use heaven in the Christian terminology. It's not a state. It's like an actual place.
It's post life instead of in life.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know that I hesitate to just like lock in yes with that, but right. Like you can achieve a state of nirvana in this embodiment of who you are. Whereas in heaven, it's like a destination to get to that is perfection, and it is peace and happiness and fulfillment. And so it's almost like in the Western mind, maybe, or maybe it's just the Christian mind, I'm not sure. But you get to this place where the environment kind of pulls you into a state of happiness, whereas maybe it's not fair to say in Eastern cultures, but I'll say it. In Eastern cultures, it's the pursuit and the journey of getting to the state of nirvana. It's not the environment that gets you there. It's you having to correct things from within.
That's very, I think that's pretty accurate from what I've experienced. Wow. I've never drawn that line before between this is this distant state like I grew up with that I can't ever experience in this life, which is, as I've been more, I'd say this energy stuff that I'm working in isn't completely Western, but, Eastern, but it falls more along those lines. And it is more about the journey, and you can experience those states today and now. And I think that's why it resonates with me a little bit better. Again, no harm, no foul on anybody or your perspective, what you believe, but that's a really interesting observation to me.
That's what's resonated with me more. And that's why I think, like, when I hear you talk about it over the past few months, I'm like, I'm interested, because to me, it's not this land that I'll have no way of really getting the outcome of it, because as I described it, which is just my opinion, it's an environment that you get to that brings you the joy and happiness and peace. And you can't get to that environment in this lifetime. And all that I know to be true is this lifetime.
Yeah.
I don't know that that environment actually exists. So I would rather hedge my bets on what I do know exists. And you can even say exists loosely.
Air quotes.
That's a whole nother mind to get into. But I'd rather invest in this life that I know exists and try to reach a state of fulfillment or nirvana.
I like that. That's pretty fucking cool, man. And it's interesting in my journey doing, lots of the different like Christian traditions and different aspects, because anyone who's either been in that space or, you look just from, 2 steps outside of it, there's so many different, what am I trying to say here? Representations, expressions. That's the word. There's so many different expressions of Christianity, but they're still under the box of that. Mm-hmm. And so as I bounced around looking through all these different expressions, some of them had a version where you could experience, whether it's that state or whatever in this moment, where some of them didn't, and it was all delayed on the next life, or afterlife type scenario. It's interesting because that, and I can just hear someone asking as we're talking about this. So are you just chasing an altered state of consciousness? Is that all spirituality is? Is it just an altered state of consciousness where you're elevated, that nirvana state you're saying, that enlightenment. Whatever. Mm-hmm. What's, and we've had the substance conversation in this episode. Is it just a way to get high? Is that all spirituality is? I don't think so, but what would you say to that?
I think no. I think we've already covered this a little bit, in the sense that an experience from mushrooms makes you recognize that there's something more to the normal plane of existence and reality that we're all used to going through day to day.
Right.
And I think that it's not about like chasing a state of altered consciousness. I think it's about trying to fix the things that you can fix. And this is so abstract.
I know.
It's so difficult to talk about, but like, it's a way to fix the things that you can fix, and fix is all relative to you as a person. Like, this is going to be a dumb example, but like, maybe there's a culture. Well, okay, human sacrifice. Let's talk about that. So some cultures have attributed positivity from human sacrifice, and they get something good in return. And in other cultures, it's like, you can't go fucking sacrifice somebody. Like, get out of here. That's ridiculous in our like modern world. But both were trying to, let's say I would try to prevent human sacrifice, and that's my way of fixing the world. And somebody else might be like, we have to please the gods. Like, we need to sacrifice more people. And so they're two juxtaposed ideologies, but they're both kind of headed in the same direction of
The intention is still to improve or make better.
making better. Right. Yeah. So fixing something is all relative to a person. And taking mushrooms can help you fix different things because you're thinking about the issues that are preventing you from moving forward in life and the things that are making you feel sad or holding back, or maybe it's time to move on from a bad experience. And in a similar way, I think religions or spirituality, which I know are different,
Yeah.
but they're about achieving a similar outcome, fixing things, but through maybe like a defined path. You have the 10 Commandments, for example, and it's like, these are some rules to live by that will help you be happier, more fulfilled. Another book that I've read, which is a controversial book, but it's 12 Rules of Life. And
Who's that by?
that's by Jordan Peterson.
Okay.
And that's, to me, it kind of served a similar purpose. It's like, these are the 12 rules of life to help you not get into the rut, not fall into alcoholism that a lot of people do, and instead like invest your time and energy into building a better environment and healthier, more satisfied, fulfilled, pursuing the things that mean something to you as an individual. And they're all different ways of getting there.
Right. Yeah, I think that's what's so interesting about this whole spiritual conversation or conversation about spirituality is that when it's so hard to grasp and talk about, because like this is a water bottle, you know, you can see what it is, you can hold it and experience it, and we can all observe it together and come to conclusions. Whereas spirituality, I feel like in individual traditions, people might observe and experience together and come to the same conclusion, but someone not versed in that tradition might come in and have a different experience and a different conclusion. And so it's interesting because I know there's some people who go, it's all bullshit. But the other end of the spectrum where it's like, that's all there is. And then, you know, I think us where we kind of fall in the middle somewhere where, you know, it's important and valuable. And at least for me, it's part of my existence. I think it's part of everyone's existence. It's just a matter of if you accept or aware of it or not. Again, my opinion. But yeah, I feel like there's that whole spectrum of there. And I think balance is really important as well.
I think you're right. And I don't think that there's any right or wrong answer. And at risk of throwing a narrow-minded perspective out into the world, again, we're all here to just kind of explore ideas and try to correct the things and see what we're missing. But the example of your water bottle, that's something that I can say I know is there. Like there is a water bottle. And if somebody tried to deny that, everybody on the planet would be like, you're losing it, bro.
Yeah.
You're losing it. When it comes to spirituality or religion or whatever other manifestations of spirituality, there are people that say they know that God is out there. Maybe I'm the guy who we were making fun of about saying that there's no water bottle, but to me, like, there's no way to know by the literal definition of what know means to know that there is a God or know that there is a soul within my body. And that's where it's hard to go beyond like what you can say, you know.
Right.
there are sensations that I have that feel like there's more to life and more to existence, and I can bite on that all day long.
Right.
I just don't know what it is.
Right. It's in your mouth and you're chewing on it, but you have no idea what the fuck it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because I think the way I would describe or deepen exactly what you're just talking about is it's all easy. What if potentially, right? What if we all have the ability to sense and are aware of things much higher than this third dimension? So those sensations you're talking about, these things that are not tangibly explained, but just like any other muscle, we've not learned or we've not been taught to use it. And so we all have the ability to experience these spiritual things, however you want to put that. But we're not taught to, or it's not necessarily culturally normal to experience it. Mm-hmm. And so that way the collective doesn't have those eyes to see and go, yeah, this is obviously here. But if we all had that muscle strengthened, it would be very easy as a collective to say, oh yeah, of course that's there and it exists. Does that make sense? Is that a good hypothesis?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. And this is similar, not exactly what you described. But like, if I think about, let's go back 500 years. Mm-hmm. It's really not that long ago. And if somebody told you that there are waves traveling through the air, like, get out of here. And we can just talk about sound. And that's something that everybody experiences. Nobody's aware of this like pseudo-physical thing that exists and is very real, but there's no way to measure it back in the
500 years
antiquity.
Ago. Yeah.
And there's no way to know, if I use my own terms, that it's out there. But you might just be like, but I just got a feeling that there's something, like I can feel the vibrations in my ears. And it's a very real feeling. I think that it's very plausible that a similar situation unfolds with spirituality or energy.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to put it. Especially that, not necessarily awareness, because we're all aware of sound, right? We can hear it, we can experience it, but that's just it. You can't physically touch it, but I'm experiencing it, I'm sensing it, so I know there's got to be something there. And so what if there was a way for us to not have developed ears and people were just deaf and then some people could hear? How weird of a world would that be? Because people, I don't ignore the weird flaws in this analogy, but you're communicating and going, no, there's no sound. What the fuck are you talking about? You hear shit?
Yeah, and it's the same thing with like, infrared radiation and microwaves and just all these different energies. Or I could be way off on this, but I think it's like dark matter, or maybe it's dark energy, but something like this. Neutrinos, maybe they're called.
You're saying a lot of fancy words that make me sound smart, but I don't know what they are.
Because I'm dumb, but I listen to smart people talk. I learn words.
You're not talking about Big Bang Theory, are you?
No, but I've heard that's good. But so they're like, I think they're called neutrinos, but they're like these little particles that are just being fucking flung around throughout the universe.
Yeah.
And they'll pass through your body and you have no awareness to it, but you can physically measure them with, certain instruments that we have. And so we know that they're out there, and they'll like pass through walls and pass through your body, and they'll interact with, I may be off here, but I think they interact with like the matter and kind of in a way that radiation can change your DNA. They can hit electrons and atoms inside your body. And that's fucking crazy, first of all.
So I'm just visualizing this like a little meteorite going through my chest that is so small somehow my chest can't stop it, but it affects me as it goes through. Am I following along?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, so I think it is neutrinos. The definition is a neutral subatomic particle, meaning like smaller than an atom, with a mass close to zero,
Jeez.
and half integral spin. I don't know what that means. Rarely reacting with normal matter. 3 kinds of neutrinos are known, associated with the electron, the muon, and the tau particle. And so anyway, these particles are like passing through us and interacting with us. And I don't know how this ties into spirituality, but it's like that detection of so much more that actually exists that we're just not aware of in our everyday life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good anchor to give some validity to the possibility of all of this shit being real. That, hey, we've got these cool instruments that can recognize these things. And so what if we have those same instruments internally, but we've just not built those muscles?
Right.
And that's why we can't be aware.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting.
And that's what makes me say, like, okay, so it's very plausible that something more than what we're aware of today is out there.
Yeah. And
it's hard to, you can't deny that either.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I more live in that realm of like, oh yeah, this shit's all fucking real. You know, aliens, dimensions, like it's all fucking real. But having a balanced conversation with people who don't share the same perspective, it's like, well, how do I bring someone there who hasn't had my experience? That's what this whole conversation has been a fun exploration about. Like, it's been challenging too.
Yeah, this is hard to talk about.
This is probably one of the hardest podcasts we've ever done, just because we're talking about such. And for some people, like, don't be disrespected when I say this, who are very spiritual people, but this is out there shit, you know, for people who don't vibe with it or isn't their thing. So, trying to be aware of absolutely anyone in any perspective, it's hard to like have this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And so yeah, it's all about just kind of exploring the idea here. And on the other side of the conversation, maybe not so much spirituality literally, but what spirituality means to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I think it puts people on a certain moral compass that most of humanity has kind of like an agreed upon set of rules that are a good way to live your life by.
Sure.
And the pursuit of having a good spirit, or the pursuit of nirvana, or the pursuit of living a Christian life and following the rules laid before you is a good way to ensure that your life isn't bad. And of course, it's all relative. Again, we have the human sacrifice example. But generally speaking, I think most of humanity has aligned ourselves on what a good life is.
Yeah, or at least what that line of morality is, right? Of like, I mean, don't kill people, don't fuck people over, right? And most countries and stuff have, you know, boxes and laws that say, hey, you can't do these things. Mm-hmm. So there's a version of morality that's pretty much agreed upon.
But I don't even think that it takes a state to tell you what morals is.
No, but what I'm saying is that if we've agreed as a culture to say, here's a line, that's how these things happen.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying that, oh, look, the government told us what's right. Fuck that noise.
'Cause let me tell you, speeding is good for everybody. I'm kidding.
A little bit of speeding is good for everybody.
A lot of it. I'm kidding.
Stay safe, bro.
I actually don't speed. I got so many tickets when I was younger. I set my cruise control to like 5 over. I'm like, all right, we'll get there when we get there, baby. It's all about the journey.
I'm gonna throw a pro speeding tip out since we're talking about speeding now as a brief escape from this heavy fucking topic. For those of you guys who want to speed and not get tickets, let me tell you what to do.
We're all listening.
You download Waze, W-A-Z-E, and you use it for GPS wherever you're going, and people can input where the cops are, and it will tell you that a cop's coming up, so you slow the fuck down. Dude, I've been using that for years, and I cannot remember the last time I was pulled over, much less got a ticket. Because you go 80, 90, however much you want to go. Don't
112.
Don't run people off the road. Don't put you or other people in danger. I'm not advocating for that. Live your own life, but don't be dumb. but man, go fast. And then, oh, thank you. Thank you, friend who told me where the cop is. I'm going to slow the fuck down.
And it'll even pop up and be like, ding-ling!
Yep.
Police reported ahead.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
And it's legal. It's not like the scanners that if they catch you with them, you can get in big trouble.
That's only illegal in like 4 states.
Oh,
you can have them in Tennessee. I used to have one, and it works great. It picks up all of your like automatic sliding doors at a retail store or a grocery store. So they use the same kind of like radar. There are actually different kinds of radar, but police use some of the same technology.
Yeah.
It doesn't work if you're speeding and say going up a ridge that's been dynamited out and it's got a curve in it, and the radar just doesn't pass through that little canyon far enough for you to get an advanced notice.
And this is one of Nick's got a ticket stories.
Oh, of course not. Of course not. Yeah, it was.
All right.
But yeah, interesting.
That was a good deep breath. I feel lighter. Let's go back to this challenging topic.
Spiritually or physically?
Fuck you again, but yes, both. Is there any other questions or anything we've not explored? I mean, there's 1,000 things we could explore, but is there anything that you wanted to talk about in this spirituality discussion that we've not hit?
Man, nothing that either of us are going to be qualified to talk about.
Oh,
but
shit, bro, we're not
that's the
qualified to talk about anything on this podcast. We're just exploring. So that means yes. Let's talk about one more thing.
I can't wait to get to the point where we can bring like guests on here, like somebody who's studied, like a philosopher, somebody who's like really studied metaphysics.
And we're gonna be like, yeah, man, I don't know. That might be bullshit. And he's like, no, I know. Here's the.
Where's that?
But what about?
We need Aristotle. Let's bring that boy up. The soul, like 7 grams to a soul.
Yes.
Isn't that what?
Something like that. Because they did the.
When you die, you lose 7 grams of weight.
But let's cue that up a little bit. Can you imagine being that dying guy, and they're like, hey, we know you're about to kick it. Can you lay? I'm sorry, buddy, you're not gonna have a deathbed. Can we put you on this big human-sized scale? Because we want to see what happens when you have that moment. Can we? What do you gain from that? Like, all right, sure. Was he a prisoner? Well, you don't get a choice. Lay on this scale. How the fuck did that happen?
I don't know.
Who thought of this?
It's got. I bet it's not like what's going on here? There's got to be something where, like, in a hospital, there's some condition that requires you to be on a bed that has a scale attached to it. And 7 grams is pretty sensitive, first of all, when you're measuring, like, 200 pounds. 7 grams is sensitive. But there's got to be something where they're like, I'm noticing a trend here. Like, dude got 7 grams lighter. These next 2 girls got 7 grams lighter. And my grandpa... Jonathan got 7 grams lighter. What's going on there? One thing that I just thought of that might be it, you know, like air weighs something.
Sure.
Could it be that like your lungs inflated versus that exhalation of breath?
I think that's possible, but I think if they're putting people on a scale that can weigh for that difference of that subtle of a difference in weight, I think they would have tested for that.
Yeah, they're pretty precise there.
You know what I mean? Like, oh wow, this one. And I think everyone's lung capacity is different too. So my guess would be that they didn't do this just on one person, and so that would be wow, it's 7, it's 12, it's 15. This person had huge lungs.
21 grams, I think it is.
Okay.
I'm trying to Google this now because now I'm really curious.
He's invested.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And this is something that we can't just research all right here now. But I'd be curious, like, was it always 21 grams? We had a question earlier about how this happened. Might be answered in this first 2 or 3 sentences.
Hey, here we go.
The April 1907 issue of American Medicine featured a paper by Dr. Duncan McDougall describing his experiment whereby the beds of dying patients were placed on a sensitive balance. Believe it or not, he was trying to weigh the human soul. So he did it intentionally. First of all, I love it. That's savage as fuck. He's like, this is for medicine. It'll help you ease, but yeah, he's gone. What's the weight?
Hey, we got another one. Did the scale go off?
Interesting. After weighing his 6 patients, McDougall went to work on dogs. He got his hands on 15 dying dogs. Oh, how he got these dying dogs is not clear. But he found no weight loss at the moment they expired.
Ooh.
Interesting. He wasn't surprised, of course, because he didn't think dogs had souls. Have we just brought this full circle?
Yeah, dude, because we mentioned this in the beginning.
There it is. It's proven. We know dogs don't have souls. They don't go to heaven. I'm sorry, Balto.
Just the conviction. You're like, it's proven dogs don't have souls.
So that means that heaven can't be truly perfect because your dogs don't go to heaven. And what would a good, happy life be without Balto?
What if people who go to heaven don't like dogs, and so therefore it is a perfect place?
Maybe that's it. Maybe we all...
You're just fucking all sorts of paradigms right now.
You hit that level of enlightenment where you're like, you know what? As much fun as I had with my dogs, it's a pain in the ass. He's always knocking stuff over. He pissed in the corner too many times, and that doesn't mesh well with heaven. I'm not trying to shit on heaven. That's not at all what I'm going for. I'm making light of it.
Or dogs.
Or dogs. I love dogs. I wish I had a dog and not my dumbass cats.
Interesting. So in this limited one-time experiment, dogs don't have souls by said definition, but humans do. Did you find the weight
of
the human soul?
Yeah, 21 grams.
It was 21 grams.
I can read more of this. McDougall of this place in Massachusetts placed 6 dying patients on a specially constructed balance and concluded that at the moment of death, there was a loss in about 3/4 of an ounce or 21 grams. He had previously determined the weight loss attributed to evaporation of moisture from the skin. Form the skin is what it says, but we'll keep moving on. McGill.ca, where your editors at? By comparison, this was sudden and much larger. He even controlled for weight loss due to urine and fecal eliminations and concluded that these could not account for the change in weight. Air loss from the lungs was not the answer either, as he determined by lying on the scale himself and noting that breathing had no effect on weight.
Hot damn.
Well, hold on. How does that not have any effect on weight? That doesn't make sense.
I don't know.
It has to.
I'm not that guy. I don't have the scale.
I take everything back. Dogs have souls.
The experiment was fucked.
It has to, though, right? Like,
I don't know.
If you fill a balloon with air...
No. But think about, that's not going to change the weight of the balloon. So think about your regular scale. It's set to 0. The air doesn't change the weight or the registration on the scale. Is that what you hear what I'm saying? You're not wrong in that it has weight, but it doesn't register.
I know what you're trying to go. I haven't worked it out in my mind yet, though. So, okay, let's think about this. Air is just neutral. So, like, if you have a scale, it's technically we're all at 1 atmosphere of pressure.
Sure.
And so a scale is zeroed at 1 atmosphere, right? And that's how much all the air above us weighs on that scale. 0 pounds exactly. If you take a balloon...
An empty balloon and weigh it.
It's going to be, let's call it 7 grams
Sure,
or something.
7 grams, cool.
And if you fill it up with air, you've captured all of that air, and so it can't be escaping, but in theory, that air was already there to begin with.
Right.
So it's not weighing more on the scale.
Yep.
Interesting, okay.
So the breathing even though the air is in and outside of the body, it's still around. It's not going to change the effect on the scale.
Right. And technically, if you're exhaling a breath, that air, let's say you're laying down on your back and your mouth is facing up. When you exhale, that air is above you, and so it's weighing down on you.
That same pressure's still there. There's not going to be a fluctuation in the scale. So it's going to be, it's not breath, that loss, there's something.
Interesting. Huh. All right. Well, now we know souls are out there or not.
Or something. There's some sort of something that leaves your physical skin suit when you die. Where it goes, what happens, is up to you.
And dogs don't make the cut.
Yeah, dogs don't have that. That's so weird. Your cats probably do, though.
I don't think so. No.
So if you've gotten this far in the episode, thanks for hanging with us for some very heady, out there conversation. Hit us up on social media, whether that be YouTube or Instagram's probably where we're most active. Let us know what you think. Share your perspective. We're here to explore, and by no means do we think we have it all figured out. So we'd love to hear what, especially on all our topics, of course, but especially on this one that's very, you can discuss and constantly get more perspective. I want to hear more.
Yeah, where's the end to this? There is no end. This is one that just keeps on going. It's the Energizer Bunny.
Mm-hmm. Or that stupid song from that one TV show. This is a song that never ends.
On that note, this episode does end, and we appreciate you all for listening. Peace out.